right. One of the demands from the U.S. was to end the booze ban on U.S. liquor because alcohol has taken center stage of this entire trade negotiation. So now that the trade talk is suspended, how's the alcohol and spirits industry in the United States reacting to this news? For that, we've reached Chris Swonger in Washington. He is the president and CEO of the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States. Chris Swonger, it's good to see you again, sir. I think last time we spoke, you mentioned you weren't Democrat, you weren't Republican, you were the party, more or less.
Cocktail party.
Cocktail party, that's what it was. How are you feeling today? I might have had a few cocktails, but I don't know if it would have been a party.
Sure. Well, look, on behalf of the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, and I had the privilege of representing many great Canadian spirits brands as well, down in the dumps, I have to say, really, really disappointed. We had high hopes leading up to late yesterday afternoon, and then obviously the news broke. So this is devastating. It's been devastating for the U.S. distilled spirits industry over the last year and a half, as many of the provinces have stopped the purchase of American distilled spirits. And we wake up this morning with a 50% tariff being imposed on Canadian distilled spirits, and it's going to be brutally hard for our friends and our colleagues in Canada, where the United States represents 93% of the market for Canada. So we hope that the government leaders on both sides of the border can find a resolution.
Look, the economic carnage of all of this is pretty obvious to anyone who pays attention to the data that is not what is the stock market at today, right? People are losing jobs. People are losing money. Kentucky, Tennessee, a lot of the key distilling economies and states are getting absolutely hammered by this. So why is it, Chris Swonger, do you have any better insight as to why the U.S. administration just kind of doesn't see it that way? Because we keep hearing the president saying tariffs are making us richer and the economy is doing great, and that's just not what's happening.
Yeah, well, again, we've lost 73% of our exports. The United States, year on year, in normal times, would export about over 220 plus million annually to Canada and American distilled spirits products. And in return, Canada exports over 500 million in Canadian distilled spirits products. American consumers and American citizens love our friends in Canada, and American consumers appreciate and love Canadian distilled spirits products. So when you apply a 50% tariff on that 500 plus million in revenue coming into the United States, it's going to be pretty devastating. And we have felt the brunt of that pain, certainly on the U.S. side. And I think economic carnage is a good way to put it. And, unfortunately, our industry should have never been involved. Obviously, there are high-octane politics at play, and this administration, the U.S. administration, has a different view in bringing more American manufacturing back to the United States and so forth. But, under NAFTA, under USMCA, the hospitality economy in Canada and in the United States thrived. And it has suffered mightily over the last year and a half here in the United States. Great states like Tennessee and Kentucky, but even craft distillers all around the country have been hurting as a result of the provincial ban. And unfortunately, as a result of what happened yesterday, the significant pain, I worry is gonna be imposed on Canadian distilled spirits industry. And we're unique. We're intertwined. We're an industry of one. So we hope cooler heads will prevail, get us back on the store shelves in Canada ultimately, and of course thwart that 50% tariff on Canadian spirits products as well.
So just on that, it's obviously the provincial governments and territorial governments that have made the decision because they control the purchase of alcohol and the sale of alcohol under our Constitution in Canada. Even if you get the market access back, because that was seeming like a possibility at the middle of this week, right? Which is where your optimism came from. Do you get the brand loyalty back? Because people are mad, even if this goes away. They've found other options, they've made decisions, and Canadians are seized with this on a level I don't think your day-to-day American necessarily is, right? I mean, do you think they'll start buying again, even if you get back?
It's going to take a while. There is no denying that. And even, having the privilege of participating in Canadian media, I've been the brunt of some of those emotions. And again, I'm not, I represent the distilled spirits industry on both sides of the border. I started my career having the privilege of representing Canadian Club out of Windsor, Canada. And so, it's unfortunate, but I recognize the emotions in Canada are very, very high, and I've received some of those strong emotions directly from Canadians, where I'm just kind of caught up on behalf of our industry. Our industry is caught up in it. And unfortunately, what has transpired over the last 24 hours is going to be pretty significant to the Canadian distilled spirits economy as well.
Well, look, I remember some of that blowback, Chris Swonger, because I think one of the last times we had you on my show during the weekday, the coverage of it, you're really keen to get back on the shelves because you're advocating for the economic interests of your members, and we can understand that because, and the Prime Minister talked about this today. He goes, we're taking this step reluctantly on the counter tariffs that they're going to unveil next week because we recognize it will raise costs for Canadians, but because we recognize that some U.S. companies and U.S. states are innocent bystanders in a dispute they did not want. And you would be in that category, right? It's not like the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States was going to the White House and saying, you know what would be a good idea? Start a trade war with our biggest market. You're collateral damage in this just like ordinary Canadians are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And look, we recognize when and if we ever get back on the shelves in Canada on behalf of the U.S. distilled spirits industry, it's going to be an incumbent on those great brands to work hard to try to earn the trust and respect back. And at some point, we may never be able to do that, but and let Canadian consumers choose. But we are. And our industry, and I talk about our industry, the Canadian and American spirits industry, thrives with no trade barriers, no tariffs, and open markets. So we have a saying, we want to compete on sip and taste. And the industry is great and has been great for both countries over the last 30 plus years because of no trade barriers and NAFTA and USMCA. And unfortunately, our industry got kind of swallowed up in some of the broader issues. And we recognize, I got to stay in my lane, but recognize there's big issues related to dairy and autos and steel and aluminum. But our industry collectively is an unfortunate victim, and the pain's only going to get greater.
Well, that's just what I wanted to ask you as a final point, Chris Swonger, because not only are talks off, negotiators back in Canada, counter tariffs going up, and support programs rolling out to weather the storm here in Canada, the Prime Minister talked a lot today about trust just being gone, signatures written in pencil, and the reliability that any new deal would endure. There's a real lack of faith on the Canadian side that the Americans will be good to their word because, let's face it, we're in a war on a deal President Trump negotiated himself back in 2018. So when you look at being stuck in that dynamic as collateral damage, and I fully accept that it's the situation you're in, I mean, how much worse can it get for your industry in terms of job losses and maybe business closures?
It's going to be significant because that 50% tariff applied on Canadian spirits coming into the United States will ultimately impact that American consumer that enjoys a great Canadian whiskey. It's going to impact the bartender. It's going to impact farmers. We have a saying, grain to glass, farmers, and certainly Canada. So it's going to be across the board pain. And please let me just convey, our industry here in the United States will continue to aggressively make the case to this administration, and the industry will do the same, I think, in Canada to try to get this industry out of these broader issues because, I think at one point we were thought to be maybe a leverage point, and we're caught up in that whirlwind, and the economic pain is going to be significant for both countries.
Yep. One person's leverage is another person's victim, right? And this is the situation we're in as this plays out. Chris Swonger, I appreciate the time. This is Chris Swonger with the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, Washington. Thank you, sir. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday.
Hang in there. Cheers, everyone. Thanks.
Cheers, sir.